forward on this computer. Okay. Hello, hi, I'm Emily Lillo, and this is my personal project, and I'm doing the teacher identity interview. Today, I will be interviewing my sister-in-law, Miss Aaryn Kealty, and yeah. So this is the plan for our meeting today, or our interview today. So I'll do an introduction, and Aaryn will be doing a profile of herself, just talking about her growing up and her identities. I asked Aaryn to create her own identity map today, and then we'll have a Q&A portion. So Aaryn, do you want to take it away?
Sure, yeah. Hi, so I'm Aaryn Kealty. I sort of talked with Emily a little bit beforehand about this interview and sort of what should go into my profile. And Emily sort of informed me, different things that should be included that were pieces of my education experience that led me to be the teacher that I am today. And so coincidentally, I had just done a similar project, very similar to the one Emily is doing, but I obviously didn't interview myself. And I had to put together a portfolio of my educational experience. So I just happened to have pictures of report cards, not digital, obviously, because I went to school in the 2000s, but I happen to have some pictures. So this report card, I believe, is from second grade. And as you can see, right, I was really struggling. I was in 2 different reading intervention programs. I was really struggling with phonics, and I was a really struggling reader. My spelling was also absolutely atrocious. And I was considered for one of the spots for non-promotion or being held back when I was in second grade. And during that time, I was also in a pilot program, which was called the MAC class, multi-age classroom, which now has, I think it has it went from 2 staff when I was in it to now they have 15 staff. It's a huge program. And it is really all about community building and sort of grouping kids not by abilities and not by their age, but just so that we have all the kids mixed into one space together. You can go to the next, Emily. Yeah. So on here, like I said, I had kind of been on my teachers' radars all through elementary school. I had the worst attendance in my elementary school, both my 3rd grade year and my 4th grade year. And that is attendance in the entire school building, which impressive, I know. And in 4th grade, my mom actually pulled me out of school for almost 2 months after my younger sister had passed away. And I really struggled. That was another time when I actually was considered for a non-promotion, so to be held back in 4th grade. My teachers were sending me materials in the mail to complete. In science, I remember really vividly, we were learning about weather patterns, like the very preliminary elementary understanding of weather patterns. And I really struggled. I have no idea how I was not held back, but I wasn't. I'm here. And then the following summer, my half brothers and I were pulled out of my mom's house. We were separated, and I went to live with my grandparents, who have a very, what is the way I would put it? They have a very driven, motivational household. And my attendance went up. I never missed a day of school in 6th grade. My grades increased. I, as you can see, was graduated from elementary school and was actually one of the top kids in my class.
I will say I did not know anything. I've known Aaryn for about 5 years now, and I did not know any of this. So thank you very much for sharing, Aaryn.
So I went on to UW-Madison, and coincidentally, when I got there, I was a psychology candidate, an honors psychology student in the College of Letters and Science. And I met with this woman, this Irish woman. She was from Ireland. Her name was Geraldine O'Malley. And she was like, what are you doing trying to go to school for psychology? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she was like, you've really explained to me that you want to help kids and you want to work with families and you want to really like be a person that, is interacting with a ton of kids and a ton of families. And she was like, that just doesn't feel like a psychologist to me. She was like, you should go over to the School of Human Ecology, which was right by my dorm. And you should apply to be in their Human Development and Family Studies program. And I did that my sophomore year. And I never looked back. I loved being in the HDFS program. And I actually ended up with a minor in education services because I had been in an educational psychology internship all 4 years. And my professor pushed me into getting that minor, which actually ended up really helping me when I went back for my master's. But at this point, I still did not have any plan of becoming a teacher. I thought I was going to be like a child life specialist in the hospital or something like that. So I had no idea what I was doing. So I graduated and I was planning on moving back to Milwaukee in 2016. I was toying with the idea of going to graduate school, but I didn't know what for. I was looking maybe at jobs. I literally had no idea what I wanted to do. And my nanny really pushed me to look into AmeriCorps programs. And I was looking at a program in St. Louis and my dad was like, no, that's way too far away for you. You are not going to be able to handle that. And then I ended up between two programs, one in Madison and one in Milwaukee. And I was really hardcore looking at the one in Milwaukee and planning on moving home. I had picked out an apartment. I was going to pick up my cat, Madam, and move. And then I started dating Emily's brother and he convinced me to stay in Madison. And so I signed up to serve with the Schools of Hope AmeriCorps project, which works with students who are below proficiency in literacy skills. And I served for 2 years. I was only supposed to serve for one. And then I just couldn't fathom the idea of not doing a second year. And while I was in my second year, I was able to complete my master's in secondary education with licensing in language arts, social studies, ESL, and sociology.
Thank you.
And then from 2018 to 2020, actually in 2018, I was under an emergency license because I still was not, I don't know if you knew that, Emily. I still was not done with my master's program. I had a couple of master's classes left. And I actually was applying to a long-term sub position in Sun Prairie when I got a call out of the blue from the HR director in Beaver Dam. And he said, we have heard about the work that you've done with AmeriCorps through, the grapevine or what, I don't know where he heard that from. He could have just been saying that, but he was like, we've heard of the work that you do. We really want to come in and we want you to come in and we want to interview you. And I was kind of like, okay, well, and I was like, I'm probably not going to get this. Like, I don't have a license. I went in, I interviewed, I interacted with some students, and they were like, we want to endorse you for an emergency license. We'd love for you to be here next year. And so my last year of my master's program, I was under an emergency license teaching 7th grade language arts. And then I agreed to stay on for another contract year and teach 8th grade. So actually, I had no choice in teaching 8th grade. The parents requested that I be moved up with their children. And so my principal said, you're just going to move where the kids are going. You're going up to 8th grade. So I was like, okay. And I actually was appointed the English department chair my last year in Beaver Dam. So I was really fortunate to be able to do a lot of curriculum and instruction work. The inquiry standards, or the first draft of the inquiry standards for social studies had just come out from DPI. So I worked really closely with CISA 6. in order to develop some new social studies curriculum around inquiry standards. And then they also were planning on testing out some new language arts curriculum in the spring of 2020. And then COVID happened. And so that wasn't a thing. We had explored a ton of different curriculum, but we didn't actually end up seeing that through. And now this year they just randomly selected from the hat because we didn't get to try any of the curriculum out, which is kind of probably not best practice. But and then I met the principal of Black Hawk Middle School actually in 2018 when I was under my emergency license. Jamie Sims, and he said to me, "You're gonna come work at Black Hawk." And I was kind of like, okay, like whatever. I was like, I don't even know this dude. And I, sure enough, he convinced me after, 2 years of being like, come to Black Hawk, come to Black Hawk, come to Black Hawk. He was like, we have this position that's going to open, someone's retiring, and I want to put you in there. And so now I teach 6th grade language arts at Black Hawk Middle School, and I am one of the only new staff in the building. It's a ton of people who have been there forever and ever, and then me.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you very much, Aaryn. That was very informative. I actually learned a lot about you tonight, so that's good. Okay, so I asked Aaryn to make an identity map that was very close to what we made in class. And Aaryn, I'm just wondering if there are any particular identities that you'd like to point out for anyone to notice, or if they're,
Yeah. Well, obviously, cat mom and dog mom above all else, right? I have the cutest corgi in the world.
Yes.
I guess, wife is probably kind of important too. I would say that 2 of my absolute strongest identities would be the fact that I'm a teacher. And I will say that my husband will tell you that is like one of my downfalls, is that I see teaching as part of my identity and not just my job. But obviously, Emily, right? You know me really well. Like teaching is like, it's how I think, it's what I do. And then the other one I would say is I can't remember if it was like location or what it was, but I put Madison and Milwaukee down. So obviously I've been living in Madison since I started at UW in 2012, but I'm originally from Milwaukee. And I think the experiences that I've had in both cities have really impacted not only who I am as a person, but who I am as an educator.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move into the interview portion, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so we can have more of a, actual conversation. I have to stop sharing my screen. Sorry, I haven't done that in a while. Okay. I always forget how to do it with Zoom, So my first question for you, Aaryn, is which of your identities do you think has influenced your teaching the most?
So I guess I didn't say this when I had that on there, but I put I think I put sister or like oldest sister or oldest sibling on there. I actually think it's one of the identities I talk about the least. But being an older sister or being, the oldest kid, which my husband actually is also, I think that has probably had the biggest impact on who I am as a person and particularly who I am as a teacher. One of the questions that you're always asked, in professional developments and, this and that and the other thing is, to think about your why. Why do you want to be a teacher? Why are you here? Right? What is your why? Why do you get up in the morning and do what you do? And it kind of took me a while to like figure out my why. Like I knew that I wanted to be, and this is cliche, but I wanted to be who I needed when I was a kid. I wanted to be able to see myself in a teacher instead of like, seeing my like happy, chipper teachers with their, their children, I was about to say their offspring, with their children and, whatever, and like doing the thing, like I wanted to be able to have a teacher that like I knew wasn't perfect. And, I wanted to be that person for another kid. And then I realized over time, my why has kind of morphed into not just who I needed when I was younger, but really who my siblings needed. Especially my younger brother. He went through a lot as a little boy. And I think his teacher was really there for him, but I think she still missed a lot because she didn't really get it. And I think oftentimes that's what a lot of our students are dealing with, right? Like we can only handle so much of what happens outside of the classroom. And even though what happens outside of the classroom is totally out of our control sometimes, just being able to understand and say like, I've been there, I think is really impactful for students.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I know that you said that you don't usually talk about being the oldest sibling, but do you think that your students kind of feel that, or they like know that you're the oldest sister, if that makes any sense?
I mean, that's a good question, actually. I've never really thought about that. I don't think that kids really think, I mean, maybe they do. Kids kind of seem to think that like you are only alive from 7:30 to, 3:00. Like they don't like, I've run into kids at the store before and they've looked at me like I'm an alien. Like, and it's like, yeah, I'm at the grocery store too. Hello. I'm here. Like they think you shut off at the end of the day and you just stay there and you're frozen until they get to school the next day, right? Especially 6th grade. Oh my goodness, especially 6th grade. Like going from 8th grade to 6th grade, like the 8th graders, they were very engaged with my life, asking me about Nani and Gampy and asking me how Zach was doing, or,
because didn't you just get married when you were teaching the 8th graders?
I was engaged my first year. So when they were 7th graders, and then 2 days, was it 2 days then?
It was 2 days.
2 days before the first day of school, we got married. Wow. Now thinking about that, that's kind of crazy that we did that. But yeah, we got married like 2 days before the start of school. And the year before, actually, my kids voted on if I should change my last name or not. And they are actually the reason why professionally I've kept my last name. So socially I go, by Aaryn Lillo, but professionally I've always gone by Aaryn Kealty because that's what my kids wanted. But they did say if I ever become a Principal Lillo sounds better. And I was like, thank you for your feedback.
All the L's. Yeah. All the L's. Sounds good. Okay. So my next question for you is, which one of your identity, so this kind of goes back, or yeah, I kind of already asked this with your oldest sister one, but which one of your identities do you think that your students notice the most when you're teaching? And does this affect your teaching in any way, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess one of the identities that I didn't have on that map that actually is really important is my age. So I just turned 27. The year, oh my goodness, the year that I started teaching, like that I was first in like my own classroom, not supporting classrooms. Oh, I think I was 23, 24, 23, 20.
You're 24.
Like that. I was quite young, right? Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, right, the kids were turning 14 that year. So like when I had kids in class, right, like one of the things I would always say is like, they would do something or like make a mess. And I'd be like, yo, I am literally not old enough to be your mom. Stop acting like I'm your mom and I'm going to pick up after you. Cause I'm not even old enough to do that. Right. Like, and I would always like joke with them and whatever. And like, even my 6th graders, like they follow me on TikTok and they follow me on Instagram, and like the kids, I've always been really open and honest with the kids about like who I am. And I feel like that isn't really how older teachers were taught how to interact with kids. And I think also like kids don't relate as much to older teachers. So I think that my age is definitely one of the biggest factors, or one of the biggest pieces of my identity that the kids focus in on.
I know that, okay, this question might not make any sense for you, but like, obviously you're going to get older. Do you think that once you get older, you won't be able to like, I don't want to say you won't be able to relate to the students as much, but do you think it will be different from what it is now? Because like we kind of have like the TikTok and the Instagram kind of thing. Does that make sense or no?
Well, I mean, what it used to be Musically. Before that, it was Vine. Believe it or not, I've had them all. I have a Snapchat. Obviously, we don't snap children, right? We don't do that. No. My Snapchat's like my personal thing. But I mean, I think I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm like a young soul, because that sounds kind of like I'm a young soul. But you know what I mean? Like I don't know. And I feel too like whatever it is, however it is, wherever I am, whatever's going on in life, like even if it's not through social media, I'm always going to find some sort of way to like relate to the kids. And it's funny too, because my personality, you can ask any of my like really, really close lifelong friends. I have the same personality I've always had. Like I have not changed very much, like in appearances or in personality, for years. So, I mean, I think if I keep putting relationships in my classroom above all else, I think my kids are always going to feel like, a connection with me.
Okay. That's good. That's interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot to put the age thing on there, and I was like, I feel like she'll mention the age thing. Okay.
Then I did.
Then you did. Look at that. Okay, my next question for you is, okay, so one thing that we've been talking a lot about in this class this past semester is invisible identities. Do you think, which of your visible identities do you think has the biggest impact on your teaching?
Can I just say, invisible identities, I literally just wrote an article review today about invisible disabilities that I think was like my most powerful article review in my entire master's program. So I was just thinking about this, and I think one of the biggest things that I don't talk a lot about, that I've never really talked a lot about until until I started working in Beaver Dam, is I have really severe anxiety and depression. And I think that that's, something that a lot of people in my family have. There's a lot of generational trauma in my mom's family. And so I think that, that's a huge part of my identity that the kids don't see, and I don't really talk to them about, right? Because I don't want them to be like, upset about something and have me turn around and be like, when I was a kid, because that's not what that's not what that's for, right? But I think that it has had a huge impact on my teaching. One, because my anxiety, it makes me want to be the absolute best teacher that my kids need. And it makes me anxious all the time that I'm like not doing enough. And so like, obviously that's something I've been working on a lot over the last couple of years, right? So like I'm on spring break right now. I can tell you with absolute certainty, I worked at least 4 hours today, right? Trying to get stuff done, whatever. We're planning on reopening, first time that the kids are going to be back in person. There's a lot to be done. But also too, I like enjoy doing that. Like it stresses me out when I'm not doing that. But I think also too, that idea of, generational trauma is a huge part of my identity that the kids, I don't really talk about. But I have had some of the deepest connections with kids who have had really similar stories to me. And I think that it's really impacted the way that I've understood them. And because of that, right? Because they feel a sort of connection, whether they can see why they're having that connection or not.
Mhm.
It's really, really impacted my classroom. I feel like that was kind of a wordy response where I'm not exactly sure where I was kind of going, but I would say
Okay.
those two things, anxiety and depression and generational trauma for sure.
Interesting. And because you have talked about that you have dealt with depression, anxiety, because you are an English teacher and you get to choose, your books and everything, have you chosen books that you don't think that you saw in your curriculum, like talking more about mental health so then students can recognize that, just because you're in middle school doesn't mean that you can't have these struggles. And if you are having these struggles, maybe talk to someone.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting an interesting question and an interesting dilemma in education, I feel.
Mhm.
And I was just having this conversation last night in my CNI master's class. Is, when you have a curriculum, how far can you sort of go off the path? And not just how far can you go off the path, but how do you decide and when do you decide to do what's best for students
Mhm.
or to follow the curriculum? Because sometimes the curriculum is not the best thing at that time. And so last year, I'm trying to remember when. I want to say it was after or right before we did our Anne Frank unit.
Mhm.
Because we read the play, and we had a lot of kids that were really struggling with the ending of the play. And we had a lot of kids that were really struggling as we talked through, because the play just sort of abruptly ends. They're taken from their hideout. And so I pulled resources because it was horrible. We finished on a Friday. And then
Oh.
the kids were just, I know it was terrible. It was
Oh.
terribly planned. I did not write that in the scope. I didn't choose that.
Mhm.
But we didn't really have time to process. And so I was getting lots of emails from the kids over the weekend just about like, well, what happened to Anne Frank?
Mhm.
And so I came in early on a Monday and I pulled a lot of resources. Talking about the different accounts of what happened to different people. We read an interview with her father, and it was really impactful for the kids. A lot of teachers that I was co-teaching with just kind of moved on to the paper at the end. And that was something the kids really needed to process.
Mhm.
And then actually, we shortened up the paper in my class. Um, we shortened up the paper in my class. I don't know if everybody knew that that's what we did, but we sort of condensed what we were doing. And I was kind of
Mhm.
like, okay, look, guys, like we need to have like a conversation, get your head in the game. Here we go. If we can speed up this paper process, right? If we can do conferencing, that was my big thing when I taught 8th grade was Kelly Gallagher's right beside them and strategies for conferencing for writing. And so I was like, if we can power through this, if we can finish this paper, we are going to do an intersectionality mini unit and we're going to talk about different identities. Because one of the things that the kids really struggled with was there was someone else in the class who was reading the diary of Anne Frank while we were
Mhm.
reading the play. And so every time something would happen in the play, she'd be like, in the book, they're making out. In the book, she's doing naughty things. And I was always like, oh God. And I was like, okay, guys, we need to talk about this, right? Because we were, we had a conversation like this was her dad, who the original version of the book that was published, right? He didn't want people to know what she was doing. Like
Mhm.
he didn't want people to know she was doing promiscuous things. Like she was a teenage girl with hormones locked up with a boy. Like, and so a lot of that really guided us into this conversation of intersectionality. And we ended up doing sort of a mind map, sort of like what you did about all the different kids' identities. But we talked about how do each of our different identities impact the way that we see the world, and then how do they impact the way that the world sees us. It was really, really powerful, particularly for our Latinx students. Because, in Beaver Dam, there are maybe 1 or 2 Black students per class. And the only Black and brown students that most of those white kids are seeing are Latino students. And so, they are like, well, so-and-so is Black. And I'm like, I can tell you right now that Juan Jose is not Black. Juan Jose is Mexican. Like, no. And so it was really an empowering moment for a lot of the Latin students to be able to say, I am from Guadalajara. My first language is Spanish, and I see the world through my cultural lens. But you know what? When I look around this school, all of you white people see me as this. And so they really talked about what it was like to be a minority within the school, and actually, to be a very small percentage of the school, and how so many of them were so popular. And yet it was kind of like the case study, why are all the Black girls sitting together, or why are all the Black kids sitting together in the lunchroom? And he was like, we don't want to sit by you, because you still see us as the Mexican kids, so those were all really powerful conversations that I wish all of the 8th graders could have had. But it was really just my class, which was kind of unfortunate, but I think it really brought our class closer together. Did I tell our director of CNI that I was doing that? No. Should I have? Maybe. I don't know. But I didn't. And I definitely went off script, right?
That's interesting. Yeah, one of the things we've been talking a lot about this semester is just like, when do you need to take the time away from the curriculum in order to meet your students' needs? And so, yeah, like, especially for me as an aspiring teacher, like, I'll probably be a history teacher at one point. And I'm just like, when do I need to do the curriculum? When do I need to talk to my students about trauma that they've had to deal with, or their race has had to deal with? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. My next question for you is, if you could tell one of your, okay, so this is another invisible identity one. If you could tell your students about one of your invisible identities, which one would it be and why?
Can I give like a very specific, so it says, if you would tell your students, can I say, if I would tell one of my students, can I like switch it up?
Yeah.
So there was a girl that I had, her name was Sydney, my first year teaching. And I was kind of like on the fence about her at the beginning of the school year. Like, I was like, I don't know, she's kind of sneaky, right? I was like, I don't know if I'm trusting what she's got going on. And I learned very quickly that she had a lot of trauma in her life. Her mother, in the middle of the 7th grade year, was released from prison. And she had been a part of a drug bust. I can't remember where, not in Beaver Dam, but somewhere else. And this girl had been living with her dad and her grandmother. And she had no relationship with her dad prior to this arrest of her mother. And she sort of, was sent to go live with him, and she ended up being really close to her grandmother, but she didn't really feel like understood. And she lived with this sort of, it was sort of like, she was almost mad at herself. Like, her mother, the drug bust that she was a part of, she basically took the fall for her boyfriend, who she was like very passionately in love with. And this student always felt that she wasn't chosen. Like, her mother chose the boyfriend over her, and chose to go to prison for him instead of, staying home with her, right? Instead of just telling the truth for her. And I always wished I could talk with her about my own childhood trauma. And I once or twice, when we were talking, I said, I get what it's like to not have your mom there. And I get what it's like to be really upset with your mom. And I get what it's like to be confused about how you feel.
Mhm.
And that was as far as we ever really like went and talked about sort of what she was going through. When she was in 8th grade, her mother gave birth to her little brother. And she wanted to, be by him and see him, but she only had supervised visitations with mom once every 2 weeks. And so, she really didn't get to know her little brother that much over the course of that year. And then actually at the end of the year, her mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so she was really struggling with just everything with that situation. And she was really frustrated too, because, she could see her mother on social media posting about how happy she was to be a boy mom and how much she loved her baby. And, oh, it's so great to be a mom. And I love motherhood and I would do anything for my baby. And she was always kind of asking me, like, why wouldn't she do anything for me? Why would she only do anything for the baby? And so I have stayed in touch with her. She reaches out to me all the time. I have a picture of the two of us on my desk. Like, she will always be one of my, I don't want to say my favorite students. She will always be one of the students I have felt the closest to and I have felt the most vulnerable with. And I think that's probably because she's one of the students I've seen the most of myself in and I've been able to connect with most deeply. But yeah, if I could talk with students more about an invisible identity, I definitely think it would be just the trauma that I've been through and the generational trauma that my family's experienced and how that sort of translates to how I teach.
Thank you. It's very interesting. What was I going to ask? Have you, because she's no longer your student now, have you divulged more of what you've gone through with her, or are you still trying to like keep that teacher student relationship more professional?
Not really. I mean, maybe at some point, later down the line. I mean, you were at my wedding. I had 5 or 6 teachers from, my 8th grade language arts teacher was at my wedding. I had Schwinn got up. So that was my high school social studies teacher, got up and spoke at my wedding.
I didn't speak at the wedding, so yeah.
She got up and told the story about how she had to move me around the classroom because I, as you can tell, was a talker. And so I think I would be more than happy to, stay a part of her life. And, I always say to my kids, you might not be in my class anymore, but I am always going to be your teacher. You might not be learning curriculum and things from me. You might not be learning from me, in general. But if you need me, I will be there in a heartbeat. I have a couple of kids that, they'll still text me if they need, help with something. I had a student who, an ELL student who texted me, I want to say like a month ago, who was applying for his first job and wanted help writing his resume. So we Zoomed and I helped. Things like that, students I haven't had for a while have reached out just, to ask about different things, or, they're like, hey, when I am applying for college, can you help me and stuff? And I'm like, of course I can, anytime. Zach will tell you, no, she's not free after 4, but like, I always have my phone right here. And I tell the kids that my phone is always right by me.
Thank you. Next question. Since we've been in distance learning for over a year now, have you noticed a change between how you present your identities in person versus online?
Oof. That's a tricky one. I think, wow. I don't know so much my identity. I think that I had a teacher once who said, a social studies teacher who said, teaching is a performance. And if you don't put on a good show, the kids won't be engaged. And I mean, I'm not a math mind. I don't like math. Science sometimes is okay. If I'm engaged, right? If I'm enjoying it. And I think that in virtual learning, that idea of teaching being a performance is like just beyond true, right? I mean, if you, like, I was just in this teacher seminar, and this guy was talking about how he teaches calculus and he lectures at the kids for an 80-minute block virtually. And I was like, first of all, what are you lecturing about? Like, isn't math mostly like, doing it and like practicing the math stuff? How is it possible? Also, 80 minutes of lecturing. Do you really think that the kids are like there? And he was saying like, oh, I heard I heard a student speak for the first time in weeks the other day. They unmuted themselves and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, because they're probably not there, I mean, and that's across the board in education right now. Kids have their screens off, like they're laying in bed. They don't want you to see their home. If I was in, my mother's house and we were, doing this, there's no way I ever would have turned my camera on. So I don't blame them, but like, you have to sell yourself to the kids that are paying attention. You have to get them excited and engaged and, whatever that is that you have to do. Right. So, I mean, I do different things. Like I tell the kids I'm pulling sticks. And these are not sticks.
Those toothpicks? No, those are clips.
Paper clips.
Oh.
So instead of showing them what it is, because in real life, I let them pick their own sticks.
Mhm.
I have these little pencil sticks that they can pull and then their names are on them and whatever.
Yeah.
But if I notice that like there's a kid who's not as engaged as other kids, I'll go, big demand, and I make it like a big dramatic thing. And usually I shake it long enough that a kid volunteers so that somebody else doesn't get picked,
Oh.
And so, I mean, everything. Look at this. Let's find some of the fun things that I got here.
All your fun office stuff. Yeah.
I bought these, right? Rock, paper, scissor things. My class is literally only a half an hour long, but we do like little brain breaks. So I'll be like, okay, the next person who wins in rock, paper, scissors is going to get this thing, right? I sing a lot.
Mhm.
When the kids do something awesome, I whip out this bad boy. My little clappers, right? I do all sorts of stuff because at the end of the day, you are performing, you are trying to keep kids engaged, especially sixth graders. Ugh.
Mhm.
And, think about all the things that you're fighting when kids are at home, right? So at school, we have a no cell phone policy.
Mhm.
If you're, giving instructions or whatever, you can tell them to close their Chromebooks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When they're at home, you don't know who's talking to them in the background. You don't know if they're taking care of a younger sibling, which, I guess no matter how engaging you are, you can't help that, but you don't know how many tabs they have open. I'm going to tell you it's a lot. They're probably on their phones or on TikTok. Like, even if they don't have a phone, they're doing something.
Mhm.
I guarantee you they're doing something. And I can tell you that because I'm 27 and I had a 4-hour long class last night and I have 2 monitors. I'm either on my email or I'm doing something with grades or whatever, and I'm listening,
Mhm.
right? I'm multitasking. If you have one screen, one computer, and you're like in other tabs and doing other stuff, like you, the teacher, are really competing with everything else that the kids are doing.
Mhm.
So you want to make them want to be there. When they're in the classroom, they are there. They are stuck there. And most teachers, they're like, I don't have to put on a performance because this kid's here. They're going to pay attention. They might not do the work, but they're going to get the instructions. And from my perspective, I'm like, I want them to want to know what we're doing. I want them to ask questions. I want them to be engaged and to have a conversation with me.
Interesting. Okay, because you are going back in person. You said next week, Monday.
We're going
sometimes-
back to hybrid. Yeah, something like that. We're going back to the hybrid model.
Do you think that when you do get back in person with the students, some of them will be like, I didn't expect you to be like this in real life? Because I mean, obviously your teaching's the same in person as it is online, but I feel like there's going to be some differences. Do you think your students will comment on that?
No, not
Oh.
really. I really think I teach the same way in person as I do online. Like,
Oh.
I have all these weird little things on my desk that are all, I mean, like, look at this. Like, these weird little things that I've collected over the years. This is from your mom.
It's the ducky.
And those are all things I have on my desk in like regulars. I guess I probably won't have them all on my desk when we go back because of COVID things, but I have things I've like this thing that I'm holding is a broken ornament. I don't know if you can see it. And it, this is a gift. That's what it's supposed to look like, but it's supposed to be books. And they say a good teacher can change everything. And these boys that were in my class, they were very naughty boys, always getting in trouble, always in school suspension or out of school suspension, whatever. I adored them. They found this in the park one day when they were supposed to be at home because they had out of school suspension. And so they wrote on the bottom, a good teacher can change everything. And they were like, that's what the ornament's supposed to say. So I have tons of that kind of like, knick-knacky stuff on my desk. I float around the room. I just kind of, everything is conversational with me. I get just as off track in person as I do virtually. So I think the kids know exactly what they're getting.
Oh, I mean, that's good to know that there's going to be some consistency when the kids go back in person. They're not just like, who is this lady?
Yeah, who is she? What is the TikTok or the meme? She says, who is she? That's going to be me.
Okay, sounds good. So next question. So when it comes to your identities, which one do you think is the most prominent when it comes to working with the other adults in your building? Like, can you think of just any specific one? And do you think that affects your teaching anyway? I know that like it's with adults versus children, but I feel like I mean, I'm not a teacher yet, but I feel like your relationship with the other adults in the building somewhat affects your teaching. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a really interesting relationship. I always have had an interesting relationship with the adults in my workspace. At my last school, I was on a team of teachers that was all about how can I make myself look better. I mean, I was in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. I need I say more?
She's from Minnesota. The person watching this is gonna be from Minnesota, so she does not know from Beaver Dam. Whatever, it's fine.
Okay, so let me rewind. So I'm from Milwaukee. I went to school where the 220 program was alive and well. I was a part of a district where teachers constantly were sharing resources with each other and community members were coming in. We had a wonderful speaker come in for a class that I was in, who was from India and ended up coming here for an arranged marriage that she had with her husband, who's a doctor. And, she came in and she basically talked to us all about arranged marriages and, why they're good. And we had a conversation, before the class started and after the class started to like see how people's, thoughts on it had changed. We had, students in my class that were, they were living here with grandparents while their parents were back in China and things like that. Like I had a really diverse group of classmates. And I grew up in a really liberal part of the state. I grew up in a liberal part of the state with a lot of different people from a lot of different places. We had a huge Russian population. So I grew up hearing Russian all the time. Super interesting stuff. Then I moved to Madison, which, Madison is more diverse than I think Madison looks. We have, the white liberal Madison, but then we also have the different pockets of like real poverty. We have a massive Black and brown population in Madison, a huge Hmong population. And I really saw a lot of that in my time in AmeriCorps. Then I went to Beaver Dam, which is a lot of lower income white families and lower income Latino families, immigrant families that are very untrusting of particularly white school staff and students who identify as Black or Black and brown or biracial, who are some of the only kids in their class that aren't white. And so in Beaver Dam, there's not a lot of diversity, and there are a lot of very conservative people. And their district, aside from all of the intersectionality of different identities, I'll put it that way, the school district is very much run like a business. Is very much, can you do better than other people? Can you produce better results than other people? So in the 2 years I was there, we had teachers who wanted their test results to look better. So they cheated on things like the forward exam, which was caught and whatever, and they made the kids redo it when that happened. So whatever I'm saying, like on the record, off the record, like it was taken care of officially by the people who do the forward exam. But people there were all about, how do I get ahead? Not what do I do for the betterment of all the kids? So teachers would do things like they'd find a really cool resource, and instead of sharing it across their teacher team, last minute, they'd be like, oh, I found this resource, but I'm going to use it, but I didn't make enough copies for you. So that their kids would go to kids in the other class and be like, oh, we did this fun thing today. What did you do? And they'd be like, well, we took a test. Why did you get to do that? Right. So teachers were constantly competing with each other. And that's not really how I vibe. And so I was really close with one teacher in Beaver Dam, who I'm still very close with. I talk with her all the time. And she was my house team leader, because we had a house system my first year, and then we went to a PLC system. And she was constantly sharing resources with me. I was sharing resources with her. We would give each other feedback on, lessons and assessments. And I'd be like, all the kids miss this question. Like, is it worded weird? Like, what did I do? And that was awesome. I had a great working relationship with her. And that's sort of what I was really wanting and craving when I left Beaver Dam. Is I wanted to be in a place where, I didn't feel like I was competing with other teachers, but where we were all making each other better. And in Madison, there's kind of two camps. There's the older teachers that have been in schools for 20 plus years. And some of them, like my co-teacher or my curriculum teacher partner, she's been in the exact same classroom now for 26 years. And I was like, oh my God, you were in this classroom when I was a year old. Like, she was teaching in that exact classroom when I was in kindergarten. Like,
Oh my goodness.
oh my God, I know. And it's wild because a lot of those teachers have a very different attitude about teaching than a lot of younger teachers do. So they are very much like, this is my contract time. This is when I leave. I don't respond to emails after this time. I don't talk to students on spring break. I don't do this. I don't do that. Like, teaching for them is very much a job and not a part of their identity, right? They're like, teaching is something I do. It's not who I am. And younger teachers who are going through all of this different, they're experiencing this big shift in education, right? Into culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching and brain functions, and thinking about students and trauma and how trauma impacts if students are able to learn. And I honestly think a lot of those teachers are building better, stronger relationships with students. And I mean, I even see it, I co-teach social studies one block. And my co-teacher, I really work well with him and I really enjoy him. And he very much is willing to like go off script and talk about what the kids want to talk about. And if, one kid asked one day, we were talking about something that happened in ancient West African culture and ancient West African kingdom. And he said, do you think that slavery led to the downfall of this West African society? And he was like, that's a great question. That had nothing to do with where we were going in terms of talking about, like, I think they were talking about, I don't know, religions or something like that. And he was like, we're going to totally diverge and go this way. Whereas a lot of my other teachers that I've worked with that are older, that have been in the profession for a long time, they're like, oh, no, We don't have time for that. This is the curriculum. This is the way we're going. And they are not comfortable being uncomfortable the same way that younger teachers are. And so I think that really impacted me in Beaver Dam. I had teachers would make comments about how I favored Latino students. And I was like, well, first of all, I am the only adult in this building that's ESL certified. Second of all, I am the only person who is willing to speak in Spanish to the children. Like even the Spanish teacher does not talk to the children in Spanish. And in Beaver Dam, they had students who have been speaking Spanish their entire lives, teaching introductory to Spanish. So like,
you mean like 7th and 8th graders?
Learning the alphabet in 7th and 8th grade, even though they've been speaking Spanish their entire lives, because that is what the curriculum is. And so I think for me, that has been like that mindset that I have of like meeting kids where they are at has either created really strong bonds between myself and other staff members, or it's made it where people are like, she is doing too much. Like, you need to stop because you're making me look bad, or you need to stop because that's not how it's done here. I got a lot of that in Beaver Dam, and that was something that I really, really struggled with a lot of that's not how it's done here. You need to stop doing that. Like, I was explicitly told by one of the art teachers in Beaver Dam that it was not appropriate to be speaking to the students in Spanish, that we only spoke English at that school. And I was like, it's 2020. What are you talking about? Like, I really struggled. It was really, and that was one of the things, when you said the thing about how your professor wouldn't know what Beaver Dam is, like, that is one of the things that I really, really struggled with in Beaver Dam, because obviously I'm a white person. Like, I'm not trying to pretend I'm not a white person, a white female, right? In a white female dominated profession. But I had never, ever grown up or gone to school or anything in a space that was so reluctant to change and so reluctant to just like talking about things. I don't even remember what your original question was. My relationship with other staff. Either they really like me or they really hate me.
Yeah, is that one of the reasons why you decided to leave Beaver Dam? I know that there were other issues with Beaver Dam, but that was one of the main reasons.
Yeah, I had a student who we did 6-word memoirs. And she wrote something along, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of, it's hard to be a Black girl in a white world. And she got up and shared it with the class. And she said, this is really how I feel when I look around the classroom and I am the only Black girl. This is how I feel when we're in gym class and there are 4 different gym classes in our, giant gym. And I am the only Black person. And I had them put up on the wall, all the memoirs. And the principal sent me a sort of atrocious email telling me that they needed to be taken down because they were not positive portrayals of student experiences, and only positive memoirs could stay on the wall. And that one in particular, she said, upset another staff member. And so it needed to be taken down. And that afternoon, I actually submitted my application because I was just so sick and so tired and so done with that.
It's sad to know that like, obviously with other teachers, I'm going to have problems. I hope I don't have problems with other teachers, but just like knowing that not all teachers will be on the same wavelength, it's kind of upsetting to me, but
I've learned as an adult that it's not just teachers. It's like all people are not on the same wavelength. Like, case in point, look at our family group chat. Like, no matter what profession you go into, there will be people who are like, we must keep the status quo. And then there's going to be people who are like, this is a better way to do what we're doing. And they're going to be resistant to change, so it's not just teaching, it's everything. But yeah, there are teachers who probably shouldn't be teachers.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so you kind of already answered this question in your previous question, but because you have taught in two different schools, just because like Beaver Dam is in the rural Wisconsin, yeah, I'd say it's rural Wisconsin, and then
That's pretty rural.
versus where Black Hawk is in it's in Madison. Yes, it's in Madison. Because you have taught in those two separate schools and two very different environments. Have you noticed that there's a difference in how you present your identities to both your students and other staff?
I guess I feel more myself in Madison than I did in Beaver Dam. I think one thing that I really, really struggled with in Beaver Dam was the pressure that not only I put on myself, but that others put on me. That's when I really, really started struggling with my anxiety. And that's, when I ended up seeking, some help for my anxiety because I was just so overwhelmed with just all the politics of the school district in Beaver Dam. It just was so much for me. And in Beaver Dam, it was interesting because, hold on, he's crying. I have to let the puppy in the room.
Okay. Sorry, Jay. Sorry, this is really long. Yeah, we're having a good conversation.
Yeah, no, this is working fine. Yeah. He's just upset.
Oh,
So, I was, like I said, really struggling with my anxiety. And I mean, it was really hard. It was one of the kind of jobs, like I said, they treated it very much like a business. And so we never had like any days off ever. So any day that the kids had off, like they had off the day before Thanksgiving, we had a teacher in service day. The kids had off for Dr. Martin Luther King Day. The teachers had in service. I mean, anything you could think of that's a compensation day in Madison where like, the teachers did conferences. So they get the last Friday of the month off. Not in Beaver Dam. In Beaver Dam, you do 2 nights of conferences, no daytime conferences. So in Madison, they give you a day where the kids don't have school and you do conferences and then they have school the next day. In Beaver Dam, we had conferences on Tuesdays and Thursday nights from 3:00 until 8:00. And we had to go to school the next day. And we had to do that twice in the week. And then we didn't have any like day off to compensate. It was just part of it. Any extra time you put in on like committees and things like that was just your job. It was just like what you were supposed to do. I was amazed the first time I was doing some extra work in Madison. I was putting in some extra time creating some social emotional learning resources. And my principal was like, make sure you keep track of your hours so that we can reimburse you. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm just doing this. What do you mean reimburse me? And she was like, well, yeah, like you're creating resources for the building and you're doing it outside of contract time. Like you're doing it on the weekends. Like you get paid for that. Like that's extra work. And I was like, get out. What? Oh my God. I mean, it was very, very different. And I think I was much, much, much more unhappy. Well, I was unhappy. I am much happier where I am now.
That's good. I'm happy that you've gone to Black Hawk and that you like where you're at right now.
Oh, thanks.
Right. So my final question for you is, especially because I'm an aspiring teacher, obviously, do you have any advice for other aspiring teachers and myself about how we should go about incorporating our identities when we start our teaching?
I think my best piece of advice that I wish I would have been told is to just be yourself from the very beginning, from the very first minute that you start, be yourself. I was so nervous when I first started. And again, I didn't even student teach. Like I was student teaching on the job with an emergency license. I had my practicums, but I had never been in charge of my own classroom or like with a co-teacher, or what is it called? Cooperating teacher supporting me. And I just was in my classroom on the first day and I just did literally everything wrong. Like I don't even know what I did. I just know I did it wrong because I was so nervous and I was in charge of a room full of children and I didn't know what to do. And I was just like, hi, right? Because you can talk the talk, like you can sit in an interview and be like, if this happens, this is what I'm gonna do. Yeah, okay. Best practice. And then you're sitting there with all the kids, right? I saw a thing on TikTok today that was like teachers, first year teachers, and it was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, catch your bubble, right? Because that's what they do with the kids. And then it was like, after you've been teaching for 5 years, and it was like, hey, knock it off.
Mhm.
You heard me, that's enough, right?
Mhm.
And I just, I so identified with that because my first year I tried all the different things to like, to be the adult in the room. And I really quickly realized like, that's not my style.
Mhm.
And it, this is not my style. And I'm so honest with the kids about it. Like a lot of the kids were like, I thought you were going to be really mean after like the first week because you were like, this is the syllabus. These are the rules. These are the expectations, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, you just are not who you like presented yourself as the first week. And I have been brutally honest with the kids since then, right? Like some of the 8th graders that, I was seeing the most and I was the closest with, like, I was like, you guys, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. Right. And that's the thing, is being yourself and being totally honest, right? Like
Mhm.
it is okay to tell a kid that you messed up. Like it is. I've made mistakes before. I've spelled things wrong on the board. I miss letters all the time. Like I just do it. It's just a thing I do. I start writing so fast that like letters are missing. Or letters are like one letter merged. And kids are like, hey, it's Kealty, right? Or like sometimes I don't know the answer and I'm like, hey, I don't know the answer to that. Can you look that up on your Chromebook really quickly? And like just being transparent with kids is so important. Like I can't even express how like humanizing it is for kids to like humanize you, the adult. And like no adult knows everything, I mean, to pretend like, well, I'm the adult in the room and I know what I'm talking about more than you do. Like, it's just, and I think too, like the more real you are with your kids and the more you build a relationship for them, the more they want to be in your classroom. And like, you just like won't, I don't want to say you won't have issues because there's always going to be issues. Like there's always going to be behavior issues. There's always going to be whatever. Like you're not going to get along with every kid. I'm just going to say that right now. You're not going to like every kid, but you're every kid's teacher. And I mean, by the time you get a good relationship going with kids, like the thing that I feel like people are the most concerned about always, like as first year teachers, is behavior. They're like, oh my God, I heard this story about a kid that threw a desk. But I think personally, right, if you focus on the relationships, by the time you get to like Q2 or, even the semester transition, like the kids are usually policing themselves, right? Like the kids know the norms, the kids know what you expect. They want routine. They want you to be honest with them. They want you to be who you are so they can be who they are. And then they'll really respect your space because it's your community space. It's everyone's classroom. And so I think, that was the most powerful thing for me at the end of the year when I was teaching 8th grade, was just our space. This is our space where I am me and you are you. And we can come here and we can be in a horrible mood because something horrible happened. And I can be like, hey, I need to take a step back. I mean, I had kids that would come in my room who'd be horribly upset about something, and they didn't even have me as a teacher. They didn't even have me in 8th grade. Like maybe they had me in 7th grade. Maybe they didn't. I had kids in my room all the time. Well, I didn't know who they were. They would come in for study halls and stuff. I mean, it's funny, but I mean, I'm for real. I had this kid one time. Because kids would have study halls when I had preps, and I was like, well, you can come and sit in here if you want. I don't care. And this boy, I was like, who are you? And he was like, oh, I'm so-and-so. I had this teacher last year. And I was like, I don't think I've ever seen you before in my life. Like, I really had no idea who this kid was. And he was like, oh, Miss Kealty, I'm going to come in here for study hall. And I was like, whatever floats your boat, buddy. As long as you are getting your stuff done, you're not breaking any school rules or whatever. I don't care. I had kids who would have their cell phones in my class, which was like a massive no-no. But I was like, hey, YouTube slows your Chromebooks down. And we had to do all these different computer programs because we were like testing them out. And I was like, if you want to have your phone so you can listen to music on your phone instead of YouTube, which slows your Chromebook down, which makes your like assessment or whatever take longer, you can have your phone as long as you're not making TikToks, you're not Snapchatting, and you're not texting. And kids would have their phones out. And then if I said, hey, all right, now it's time to put your phone away. Or I'd be like, okay, I see that you're texting. That's your one warning. Put your phone away. Like, I'm not trying to get in trouble for letting you have your phone when the principal walks by. So put your phone away. That's probably not best practice. I wouldn't do that. But the kids totally respected it when I did say, okay, put your phone away. It doesn't, I think all of what I'm trying to get at is it doesn't need to be you and them. There doesn't need to be this sense of like other. Like you can be like, we're all in this together. We're all doing this together. I tell the kids when we have to read something that's part of the curriculum that I don't like. I tell them, hey, we're doing this unit right now, and you might not like it. You might really enjoy it. You might hate it. Guess what? That article that we're about to read, I read it already, and I struggled with it because it's boring, but we have to read it. And when we get through it and we do what we got to do with it, we're going to move on to something really cool. So we got to get through this part first because it's just something we have to do. And that's part of like being a human being. You have to do things you don't want to do sometimes, but we're going to make it fun. We're going to make it engaging, and then let's move on. So I don't know. That's what I would say to new teachers is don't make it about, I need to be in charge. Don't be teachers you had when you were a kid that were old teachers. Like you want to be the teacher that the kids feel is a real person. Like you want to be a teacher the kids feel like they know. And obviously not all of you, obviously not your whole identity. You don't want them to know all your business, but like,
yeah, let them know that you're a human. Okay, sounds good. Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. I just want to say thank you very much. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about you tonight. And yeah, just like thank you for all your advice and just all your stories. Yeah, thank you. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we're done with our interview?
I am very excited to see what you do and how you do it as an educator.
Thank
This
you.
was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it was fun. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.